they do not have a good hand to go back to say, okay, let's make a deal.
I'm afraid I think we still need to wait, because there's still enough of these besieged forces and the militias on the ground for people to still feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Every night in the streets, a bunch of these regime thugs go out, not huge numbers of them, but go out and chant and basically holding guns and saying, don't you even dare. We'll kill you on sight. And so there's a constant psychological reminder that the regime is still there and still existing.
So if we get rid of the mullahs, ayatollahs, we're going to get rid of security threats coming to Canada, US, and Israel. So I don't understand why these peoples are biased and working hard to destroy our movement. It's very shameful.
Hi there, this is episode 424 of Roqe. I've been away from this desk for a little bit dealing with an unexpected surgery. Glad to be back with you. Let's zoom out. Iran is not the Islamic Republic, and this regime's days are numbered. Now, at a time like this, it's hard not to get trapped in the daily drama. One Truth Social post, one headline, one terrifying image, one new rumor about missiles, bunkers, blackouts, or whatever comes next. Cue the social media text. And of course, these things matter. Lives are at stake, Iranian civilians are at risk, and a dying regime is often at its most vicious. But it may also be time to take a deep breath and zoom out. Iran is not the Islamic Republic, and this regime's days are finally numbered. Iran is not a slogan from 1979 or a clerical dictatorship or the sum total of prison walls, televised lies, and men with guns. Iran is one of the world's great continuous civilizations, a culture of poetry and philosophy, of science and architecture, of artistry, invention, and intellect, a people who gave the world empires, epics, miniatures, music, mathematics, medicine, and metaphors before this regime's founders were even a dark idea in history's waiting room. For 2,500 years and more, Iran has endured invasions, upheavals, dynasties, fractures, and rebirths. So let's be clear about what the Islamic Republic actually is. It is not Iran. It is a rupture, a violent 47-year interruption, a humiliating blip in the long and brilliant story of a people far older, deeper, and greater than the thugs who have hijacked the state. And even before the current phase of this conflict, this regime was already weak. Why did merchants close their shops in December? Why did millions take to the streets? Why were Iranians chanting for regime change and the crown prince? Because the country was already being crushed by economic collapse, a worthless currency, hyperinflation, electricity shortages, water crisis, and a state so dysfunctional it no longer seemed capable of producing anything except repression. And 3 months later, none of that has improved. It has worsened. So the conditions that led Iranians to rise up have not disappeared. They have deepened. Yes, the danger is real. This regime may become even more monstrous on its way down. Yes, it may kill more brutally, threaten more openly, and cling to power more savagely. But this is not sustainable. A nation of this size, this complexity, this intelligence, this cultural memory cannot be reduced forever to a mafia with a flag. Iran is not North Korea, not with 90 million people, not with this history, this diaspora, this opposition, not with millions of Iranians who have already shown the world that they want their country back. Remember this. Iran is not the Islamic Republic. The regime's days are numbered. And when this murderous blip is finally over, what will remain is what has always been there beneath it. Iran, ancient, brilliant, wounded, yes, but still alive and ready to rise again. It's March 23rd, 2026. This is Roqe. Well, hi there. Welcome to episode 424 of Roqe. Iran Rises. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto. Salam Dostan Aziz. Durud bar shoma. I hope you're doing okay wherever you are tuning in from around the world. Sorry about the voice and my apologies for not being at this desk for the last 10 days. I had to have a little surprise surgery to deal with dastardly kidney stone, and I am recovering and subsisting on painkillers. But a big thank you to all of you who have sent kind notes of concern and support. I'm okay. Just frustrated that I have not been able to do all I can with respect respect to this ongoing battle for a free Iran, and how we in the diaspora and on this program can be helpful. I think I've only missed 1 or 2 shows in 6 years of Roqe programming, and let's hope we won't have to miss any more in the foreseeable future. This is the 21st episode in our Iran Rises series, this one entitled Decoding Trump. And I should remind you that once again, events inside Iran, as you know, and around the Iranian diaspora are moving at breakneck speed. So we should note that we're recording this episode at approximately 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time here in Toronto on this Monday, March 23rd. That's around midnight in Iran. And as always, we're sharing perspectives and conversations as up to date as humanly possible. Now, coming up on this 424th edition of Roqe, as U.S. President Donald Trump's voice once again cuts through the global conversation on Iran through statements, signals, and unpredictability, how should Iranians be reading this moment? Is there a coherent strategy behind the rhetoric, or are we watching a series of moves that even insiders struggle to decode? As we know, for many in the diaspora, and certainly for those inside Iran, this isn't theoretical. Questions about escalation, infrastructure, regime stability, and the possibility of real change are no longer abstract. So in this episode, we're going to bring together perspectives from 3 corners of the world in this unfolding story: London, Washington, and Toronto. Journalist and researcher Shooka Bidarian, national security analyst Shayan Sami'i, and lawyer and former political prisoner Ardeshir Zarezadeh are about to join me to break through the noise and ask what this moment actually means for the regime, for the opposition, and for the future of Iran. Let's get to it. This episode of Roqe is brought to you with the support of Famluxy. Famluxy is a cultural fashion platform dedicated to supporting and showcasing independent Iranian artists. In a time when Iranian voices and creativity face unprecedented challenges, Famluxy stands as a bridge, bringing the spirit of Iranian craftsmanship to the world. In 2023, Famluxy introduced its exclusive collection, Glory Days, at New York Fashion Week, featuring the King and Queen line, an artistic tribute to 2,500 years of Iranian imperial heritage and the timeless strength of our culture. Today, in solidarity with the Iranian freedom movement, the entire Glory Days collection is offered at cost price with a 40% discount using the code Roqe. Go to famluxy.com and use the code Roqe. Famluxy.com and use the code ROQE to get your Glory Days Iran clothing at cost. Thank you to Famluxy for honoring heritage, amplifying art, and standing with Iran. Today's episode of Roqe is brought to you in part by Stellar Law. Stellar Law is a boutique litigation firm based in Toronto, founded and led by Rana Nosrat Panah. The firm represents businesses and professionals in commercial and contractual disputes, particularly where relationships have broken down and the consequences are significant. Stellar Law's practice is grounded in careful analysis and strategic decision-making. Much of the work involves contract disputes, shareholder conflicts, and complex business disagreements that require both legal precision and practical judgment. Rana and her team are known for approaching these matters with clarity, focus, and a deep understanding of what's at stake for their clients. For those navigating serious disputes with commercial impact, real commercial impact, check out Stellar Law at stellarlaw.ca. Thanks again to Rana Nosrat and the team at Stellar Law. And if you are Iranian, do note that Stellar Law operates in both English and Persian if you prefer to deal in Persian. All right, let's get to our panel. Shooka Bidarian is a British Iranian journalist, academic researcher, TV presenter, and documentary maker whose work focuses on the social, political, and environmental issues of Iran. She is joining us from London, England. Ardeshir Zarezadeh is a lawyer and activist who has recently spent time on Parliament Hill here in Canada, meeting with politicians and lobbying for the free Iran cause. He's a former student leader in Iran and a former political prisoner in Iran who spent 2 years in solitary confinement for his fight for freedom and human rights. He's the director of the International Center for Human Rights in Iran. He joins us from Toronto. And Shayan Sami'i is a U.S. national security analyst and a Near East Africa and South Asia expert specializing in strategic communications. You may have seen him on Persian news outlets such as Iran International, as well as regularly here proudly on Roqe Media. He joins us from Vienna, Virginia. Hello to you all.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. So, listen, I think it's folly to try and second guess what Donald Trump and the Trump administration are doing from one Truth Social post to the next. It's sort of a game that the entire world seems to play. But what I really want to know from each of you to begin is, what is your best perspective on where we're at in this conflict right now? Shooka, it's your first time on the show, so I'm very glad to have you. Let's start with you. Where are we at?
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me. I'm simply here to convey the messages and the testimonies I have been receiving from inside Iran. You have to remember, this is the only time in the past 47 years that Iranians, especially those inside Iran, have the hope of finally overthrowing this regime. We have witnessed since the beginning of the war, and even earlier than that, this emotional split coming from inside Iran. People are, of course, very much concerned about the well-being of their families, especially with the internet blackouts that we are witnessing. And it has been going on for almost over 3 weeks now. And at the same time, they are looking at what's happening in Iran simply as a rescue mission. They are hoping that with this, they could finally end 47 years of this brutal dictatorship. And the Western media has no idea how desperate the people of Iran are for freedom. It just highlights a level of desperation that I think most people, especially non-Iranians and those who have not experienced and lived in Iran, have never experienced it, and therefore it is very difficult to comprehend. So, in my opinion, from what I see, people are still hopeful and ready to take the streets and get their Iran back. That's what they're hoping for, and that's what they're waiting for.
Okay, that's a good survey to begin with in terms of how you see things. Shayan, what were you thinking about this weekend and this morning? Now, there's been a new Donald Trump statement saying that the power plants won't be hit, etc. That sort of took up a lot of the oxygen of the conversations over the weekend. But where are you at in terms of where you see this conflict and where you see the struggle for a free Iran 3 weeks into this war?
I see this conflict on a path of complete removal of the Islamic regime from power in Iran. But we also have to think about a safe passage that the US is pretty much trying to convey for the Iranians. From this weekend, when Donald Trump talked about wiping power plants, to this morning, let's not forget that Trump used the word country of Iran. He did not say that they're in negotiations with the government of Iran or the Islamic Republic. So when he's talking about the country of Iran, I believe he's just trying to say we have opened an avenue of conversation with somebody or a group within Iran to talk about a safe passageway. Now, Jerusalem Post has talked about the fact that that one person is Ghalibaf. Let's not forget that in the past, the US also tried to alleviate and expedite the bravado of Ali Larijani, brought him out, got him to talk some more so his location could be found. I wouldn't put it past the Israelis and the US governments that they are doing the same thing to Ghalibaf, to get him to talk, get him to identify his whereabouts, so that if there is a way to take him out, they will do that. But in all sincerity, I don't think this is going to be a conversation for the staying power of the Islamic Republic, whereas it is talking about a safe passageway or a transfer to a transitional government.
So, Shayan, it sounds like you're in the camp of this is calculated ambiguity. This is Trump's 4D chess somehow, rather than another narrative that we've heard, which is he doesn't know what he's doing.
No. He definitely knows what he's doing. He's just trying to create enough chaos within the power structure in Iran that they would have no way of knowing which way he's going. He knows exactly what he's doing, and also he's trying to put the media in a loop so they keep thinking about what his next moves are. And
Okay.
also, let's not forget that he's trying to balance the public opinion within the United States as well.
Ardeshir?
Yeah, I'm going to look at this from a different perspective. In my view, Iranians did not want a prolonged war of attrition. They wanted a decisive and powerful blow against the regime. They wanted the removal of the supreme leader, the repressive forces, and a regime change. I understand that the policy was from the US side and the Israeli side to remove the nuclear and missile threats and for people of Iran, regime change. But what is happening now, in my view, the overall approach appears to be about applying strong pressure on the Islamic Republic and at the same time keeping the option for a deal. So they're trying to do the diplomacy while at war with the Islamic regime. So by threatening or using military force, especially in a targeted way, the United States goal is to push the Islamic regime to agree to a major changes, like such as in within the regime, I mean, such as limiting the military capabilities and their long-term policies. So at the same time, there is also this underlying idea that the sustained pressure could not weaken the current regime enough to lead to a broader political change within
Let
the
me ask you
regime.
about that in a moment. Let me ask you about that in a moment. But first, what you seem to be saying is the implication is that the U.S. is not necessarily in this for regime change, or the Trump administration. Some of the conversation that we hear is, yes, but Netanyahu and Israel are. So, does that make any difference in terms of the way this is going to play out?
And I guess Israel has to work with the United States. Their strategy is the combination of force and the diplomacy, with the goal to either reaching an agreement on a favorable terms or creating conditions where the system is forced to change. When we see that President Trump is using a threatening language, basically sending signals to the Islamic regime, using the special language by his messaging style to create this fear among the regime to work on a deal. And at this time, they're talking to somebody within the regime. So I would say, based on what I'm saying and what I'm seeing, the United States goal is cut a deal. From day one, I believe that the United States just wants to sign a deal. The
Shayan,
Ayatollah
what do you
didn't
think?
accept that, and the US attacked the Ayatollah.
Shayan, what do you think of that?
Sorry, I was muted. With due respect, I don't think that that's what the US government is trying to do. The US government is trying to create enough of an ambiguity policy so that nobody knows exactly what they're doing. But behind the scenes, they're basically playing along with the game plan that they have devised with the Israelis. And case in point is that the US government, let's say if we're talking about making a deal, what is a deal to the United States? Complete removal of nuclear weaponry and nuclear ammunition and capabilities, shortening the range of their ballistic missiles, destruction of their forces around the world, especially Hezbollah and the Houthis, and recognition of Israel. Which one of them are they willing to do? Which one of them have they shown a capability of doing? And on top of all of that, when Araghchi, in the meeting with Kushner and Witkoff, says one thing, and then in front of the media says another thing, and then Witkoff comes off and talks about it and exposes them, they do not have a good hand to go back to say, okay, let's make a deal. So making a deal, I would say a deal for a transfer to a different group, to a different regime, and not necessarily saying that they're establishing a new governance, but a transitional government.
Okay. Okay. Shooka, I want to bring you take a step back actually to talking about the threat that happened this weekend to ostensibly to power plants in Iran. One of the areas that you focus on is environmental, and talk to me about how concerned you are about there being an actual threat to power plants or infrastructure in Iran during this conflict.
Well, obviously, we know that this could be disastrous, right? It's environmental cost of this means that, let's say, if we're talking about thermal plants, some of them have been mentioned. The main risk from a strike are usually fire smoke, particulate pollution, oil or chemical leaks, contaminated runoff and rubble, and all the demolition waste, all of them can harm air, soil, water, and of course the public health. But what concerns me the most is the Bushehr nuclear. The risk is qualitatively different because the core concern here is nuclear safety and potential radiological release. And so that could be in a way catastrophic, and not just for Iran, but it could possibly and potentially become a regional catastrophe. I think the International Atomic Energy Agency reiterated on the 18th of this month that attacks on nuclear facilities are prohibited and dangerous. And so if we are comparing these four power plants that have been in the discussion in terms of the possible strike, I think Bushehr is in a class of its own environmental, because the downside, as I mentioned, is also a possible radiological emergency. And among the fossil fuel plants, I think Ramin is likely the slowest and the most expensive to replace, of course. So not only you have the environmental cost of this, but also the economic costs of these civilian infrastructures that later and hopefully after the free Iran we would need to rebuild. And Damavand is also one of the other power plants. So all the environmental consequences that could be the result of this could even linger not just for years, but for decades.
Shooka, let me ask you, when a moment ago you were talking about people inside Iran and the voices that you're hearing, and I want to ask all three of you about what you're hearing from your contacts, your sources, your friends and family, for that matter, inside Iran. How much do you believe, in as much as, I mean, one of the reasons I talk about being in favor of this conflict, and I say that removing any postulate of objectivity, because I've been very clear about it in sort of the essays I do on this show, is because if we're going to talk about self-determination for the people of Iran, then when the people of Iran say they want something, we have to defer to the voices that we're hearing. There seem to be, in the voices that we heard in the millions in the streets back in January and February, a desire for obviously for regime change, but also for intervention. Have you, in the last 3 weeks, and particularly say this weekend when there was this concern about an attack on power plants, have you heard from people inside Iran in any way, any shaking of that resolve, any walking back of maybe we don't want this, maybe the status quo, as bad as it was what we should opt for? Talk to me about what you're hearing.
This is exactly what I mentioned right at the beginning as well. We are experiencing this deep level of desperation, as it's people in Iran have no other choice but to get rid of this regime. And I think the majority of people inside Iran have come to the conclusion that this regime as a whole needs to go. They have made up their minds, they have selected their leader, and they know what they want. And I was actually very much interested in what they're thinking now, and especially after the threats. And obviously, it's been very difficult in recent days for me to get in touch and get messages from inside Iran. But I did manage to speak to a couple of friends inside Iran and ask how they and their friends and family feel about the possibility of the strike. And again, the answers are very similar, and it's just striking. The message is destroy anything you want as long as we get our freedom and we get rid of the Islamic regime. People are very aware that targeting energy infrastructure will directly affect them, ordinary civilians. And I think that's the crucial point that we need to address. But they're also very much aware that if the strikes and the bombings that they have basically been enduring and risking their lives, if this doesn't lead to regime change, it will be twice as bad for the Iranian people.
Okay.
They are very much concerned about this.
Yeah.
What if this does not lead to regime change? They do not want to have to put up with the IRGC and the Islamic regime for another second after the strikes are done.
Ardeshir, in terms of what you're hearing from inside Iran, do you hear any shaking of the resolve in terms of what folks in Iran are telling you?
Well, what I hear from the people on the inside of the country is a mixed feeling. There is this feeling of uncertainty about what's coming next. And at the same time, people are happy and welcoming the removal of the supreme leader's system, the repressive forces, and they are waiting for real changes inside the country. They want the destruction of their infrastructure, their country, civilians. They want to rebuild the Iran, obviously. But at the same time, they are under bombing, not the civilians, I mean the country, the regime. And this creates this mixed feeling, as I mentioned, that there may more things come next based on the US policy. So they want a solution. What I see, there is a fear. At the same time, they want a solution, real solution, and something that happens in the next few weeks.
Okay. Shayan?
Based on my conversations with family members, and one of my family members had conducted a poll of about 20 of friends and other relatives, and they all had said this, that as soon as they don't hear any bombs, they're like, oh dear God, have they started a negotiation, or are they trying to make a deal? And as soon as they hear more of the bombings, they're like, thank God, they're on their plan and everything is working the way we want. So people are willing to actually give up everything they've got just for the sheer fact of or obtaining freedom. And one of the sayings that they have been putting on walls is, you can rebuild, but freedom cannot be obtained always. آبادی میشه ولی آزادی همیشه به دست نمیاد.
Let me tell you one thing, my friend.
Go ahead.
This regime is built to survive the war. They have this military capability and they're still surviving. And if they survive, they will kill more people. And let's not remember when President Trump said, if the regime beats you, I will beat them back. I will beat them hard. He waited for a long time, and over 43,000 Iranians were killed in the streets of Iran. What President Trump is looking for is not the regime change in Iran. He wants to get rid of the security threats coming from inside the country. It is us, the people of Iran, should overthrow the Islamic Republic.
But Ardeshir, if that were true, why wouldn't the Trump administration have ended this 2 weeks ago? We took out some military stuff. No harm done to our troops. At least we're going home now. Why would they even continue it to this point?
So you're expecting the superpower to make a trace to a dictatorship, and it's a key for President Trump. And you expect this superpower not to do anything.
No, but if it's about defanging just the military side of things, they've pretty much done that, have they not?
No, they have not. They have not get rid of all the repressive forces. The IRGC is still there. The Basiji militia, paramilitary forces are still there, and there are part of the regime is still operating there, and they want to keep them alive to do their diplomacy in the back channel. And this is what's happening right now. I'm very mad at this policy. I don't like this policy. We didn't want
okay.
this policy.
I'm glad you brought this up because it was where I wanted to go in terms of asking you all to decode for me what you think is happening. Because I mean, certainly if you hear certain voices in Western media who have their own agendas, that they'll say that the regime is as strong as it's ever been. But there's a lot of folks saying what you just said, Ardeshir, that you know, there's layers to this regime, and just because you knock off the supreme leader or a couple of others, it's pretty unshaken so far. At the same time, I mean, we haven't even seen Mojtaba. Pezeshkian is doing a Nowruz message from what looks like a bunker with a makeshift, you know, a flower and a blanket on the wall. I mean, they're not exactly communicating power in terms of where they're at. So Shayan, how do we decode this? Is the regime weakened or isn't it?
The regime is definitely weakened, and the fact of the matter is that they are trying to show the capability of being alive and being well and expressing power, but they do not have a lot of power. They do not have any power left. Going back to what Ardeshir mentioned, I want to add this. Trump and Netanyahu never said they're going to change the regime in Iran. From day one, they said they are going to do enough to prepare the situation for the people of Iran to come out and free themselves and seize power. So by destroying the structure that the Islamic Republic has had, by within the first 40 seconds killing the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and also throwing the country, the leadership into a loop as to nobody knows who is the real decision maker, they are creating enough of that. Or by the mere fact of destroying this street guards who are monitoring every checkpoint, what they have been doing is they are removing the elements of repression so the people, A, will feel good to come out, and B, have access to weaponry, who could defend themselves and defend their neighborhoods and expand it. So this is not done. Even today, this morning, Admiral Cooper of CENTCOM stated that we still want the people of Iran to stay inside, don't come out. The moment for them to come out and seize and control their government will arrive.
Shooka, if somebody's listening to this right now and listening to Ardeshir and getting concerned because what he says can ring true and can be very worrisome, or listening to Shayan and getting optimistic, well, maybe this is the time and this is it's playing out as it should, you say what?
Well, I do agree, actually. I do think that the regime has weakened, but also I know that the regime is now like a cornered beast. They can't do much in terms of retaliating. We have seen that their missiles in terms of retaliation have dropped dramatically. But what they're doing now is that they're taking that revenge or the desperation on the people. And it was mentioned by our panelists here. They are now relying on the besieged forces who are going every single night on the streets across Iran, trying to threaten people. I have a few videos I have received where they're shouting and saying, "We will kill you. Just wait and see. We are waiting for this war to be over. We will come after you." Now, I have heard that in the recent few days, there are, in some places, people are seeing a fewer of these besieged forces, to a point where they're also using megaphones and amplifiers to repeating the threats that I was just mentioning earlier. But they're still out there and they are trying to create that terror. And may I just also point out about the executions that are taking place still, and people who are still being taken, detained and imprisoned. So as you can see, the regime has become really desperate because I think they are weakened. But are we now at a point where people can feel confident enough to go out and claim their country back? I'm afraid I think we still need to wait because there's still enough of these besieged forces and the militias on the ground for people to still feel a little bit uncomfortable.
I heard from a contact in Mashhad 2 days ago that exactly what you say. Every night in the streets, a bunch of these regime thugs go out, not huge numbers of them, but go out and chant and basically holding guns and saying, don't you even dare. We'll kill you on sight. And so there's a constant psychological reminder that the regime is still there and still existing. Shooka, you mentioned something earlier in this conversation about the delta between what Iranians are saying, and I might expand that to even what Iranians speak to in the diaspora, even though there are some dissenting voices, etc., and what we see in Western media. And there has been such an avalanche, I would say, of amping up of stories and editorials and social media rants against this war. Some even very sympathetic to the Islamic regime and the mullahs. I mean, it's bizarre to see, but it's the reality at this point. Do you, and this is kind of presented a lot of times as the pretext is caring about Iranian lives, that's why we want this war to be over, etc. They'll argue. Do you see this as a natural development, as a conflict continues? Anti-war voices and different voices, even non-Iranian voices, of course, are going to amp up their perspectives, or do you see this as coordinated somehow?
I believe it's a mixture of both, and that is based on my personal experience. I have spoken to some of these Western journalists, and actually one of the reasons that I've started reaching out and wanting to go on their news programs and talk about it is that the voices of real people of Iran and what they are demanding is massively absent in the Western media. So when I talk to some of the journalists, I do feel that some of them are genuinely they don't have the information. I think Iran is a very special case. If you're not from Iran, if you're not familiar with the politics of the Middle East in the way that we, the Middle Easterns, are aware of it, you're not able to analyze it the way it deserves, right? So some of them, I think it's due to ignorance and lack of knowledge, but also I know that some of them somehow, it has become very clear to me that there is definitely some sort of a link there for them to want to ignore these voices from inside Iran and solely focusing on the minority of those who are supporting the regime. For God's sake, we've got journalists sent to Iran. Free press does not exist in Iran. You're only taken to certain sites. You have people who are going to be there with you. You're constantly supervised, and you're told exactly what you are allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. So how can, I am very cross actually, me and many Iranians, that these journalists go to Iran and they report from, as they say, report from the scene. And yet we all know that what they are reporting once they're there, it's not, or it's barely the majority of people and the voices that we are receiving over here via testimonies, phone calls, and messages. So this disconnect is absolutely, in my opinion, disappointing. And I have been trying to really get the message across. Unfortunately, we are still seeing a lot of those reports out there, and all we can do as Iranians and those who have the opportunity to get some of the information out is just to be their voices, because this is just completely unfair to those people who took the streets. They chanted, Pahlavi will return. and yet they are completely being ignored by
Okay.
most of the Western media.
Ardeshir, we spent most of January and February saying, where is the Western media? Because they weren't talking about anything. They weren't even, while tens of thousands were being killed. There does really, from my perspective, I've been a media person for a long time. I would call this an avalanche of media coverage right now. All of it, almost, not unanimously, but a great deal of it against the war, some of it pro-regime, but some of it some of it might be laced in deep sort of anti-Trump sentiments in terms of the perspective of where the news outlet is or the journalist, et cetera. What do you make of it? Is that just a natural outgrowth of a conflict and the Manichaean politics of today, or is this something coordinated?
Yeah, it's very sad to see that the Western media is not really covering the truth. They're very biased, and I even see that the CBC in Canada is bringing somebody who is very biased and a person that attacks the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. They don't even care to bring somebody else to have a balanced show. What I see, this narrative is really not helping the Iranian people. This narrative is helping the dictators. The lefties in Canada and the United States are trying to side with the dictators. They're trying to support anything that is anti-Israel and anti-Western values. And because the people of Iran are aligned with the Western values and they support democracy and human rights, very important, the human rights, these lefties are trying to destroy that values, and they try to stay against the demands coming out of from inside the country. I try to educate politicians, any key person in Canada, elsewhere, on the situation of Iran, and remind them of their international obligations and anything that helps humanity. We are all human beings. We try to achieve peace in Middle East, in Iran, and this peace is going to help Canada and US and Israel, anyone. So if we get rid of the mullahs, ayatollahs, we're going to get rid of security threats coming to Canada, US, and Israel. So I don't understand why these peoples are biased and working hard to destroy our movement. It's very shameful.
Shayan, give us your perspective on what Ardeshir just said, why this is happening, and particularly I want to ask you about what I see as some kind of campaign at this point of delegitimizing Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. I mean, that sort of amped up as well in the last few days. If you see, there's a big article in the New Yorker yesterday, sort of almost ridiculing him, and we're seeing a great deal of this. We've seen it in the British media and the Canadian media. All the reasons why Reza Pahlavi should not be the leader, which strikes me as interesting, especially in a current moment where if there's one person who seems to have a large following, it's Reza Pahlavi and the millions both inside and outside of Iran. So you would think there would also be some pieces saying, let's do a profile on this guy that everybody seems to be interested in or calling his name. What's your perspective on why we're seeing all of this coverage now, this anti-Pahlavi coverage?
Well, because the media in the United States and around the world have been mainly filled with leftists who are still of the vague perspective of the past in Iran, and they are blaming Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi for all the ailments that has happened, but they are unwilling to say that the people inside Iran are calling on him to be their savior. Now, for example, the article in New Yorker that you mentioned, the source is somebody who advised the government of the United States incorrectly about how to deal with Afghanistan, and now we see what has happened. Or his father has been somebody who has been very antagonistic toward the Pahlavi dynasty. So we have people who are bringing out their personal animosities against the Pahlavi dynasty and the Pahlavi family on one hand, and on the other hand, they're trying to rewrite their narrative. Now, one of the biggest obstacles that we have are people like Fred Pleitgen of CNN who go to Iran and think that they are getting access to the people. I was asked once, why do you criticize him? I said, Why is it that in one of his interviews, in none of the interviews that he conducts, not one person criticizes the government of the Islamic Republic? I mean, you want to tell me that the entirety of the country is in favor? This is Saddam Hussein with 99% approval rating and winning the election with 99% of the vote? So that's why what we have to do is we have to, on one hand, combat the naysayers, and on the other hand, we have to rewrite the narrative that, as Shooka mentioned brilliantly, that the people in Iran's perspective is not being heard because the outside world, A, is ignorant about the Middle East, and B, has zero knowledge about the desires and demands of the Iranian people.
Okay. I'm so grateful to all three of you. I know a couple of you have to jump off pretty quickly soon. So a very quick question to all three of you to wrap up here. What are you most hoping to see? What are you most hoping to see in the coming days? Start with you, Shayan, then Ardeshir, and end with you, Shooka.
What I want to see is the realization of the people of Iran's demands, that the world recognizes this is a dastardly regime. They have to come hand in hand, and they have to cooperate in destroying their capabilities and once and for all removing them from powers. None of this mamsy-pamsy dealings behind the scenes with them that, oh, we want to create a safe passage and whatnot. Even if they want to create a safe passage, do it as quickly so the people of Iran once and for all achieve their freedom.
Ardeshir.
Over 400,000 Iranian Canadians and even Iranians from around the world came to Canada, gathered in Toronto on February 14. They did a march for a couple hours, and they left Toronto, streets clean after them. No single damage to anything. I met the Toronto police chief yesterday, and he was telling me, I was amazed, surprised by this demonstration. He said, 350,000 demonstrated, and it was very peaceful, unbelievable. And this is the Iranian people that in diaspora, representing people of Iran on the inside. So the West should realize that we are very peaceful people. We respect human rights. If we get rid of the Ayatollahs, we are getting rid of all the security threats, and it will be beneficial for everyone.
Final word to you, Shooka. What are you most hoping to see in the next few days?
I think I'm just going to have to echo what our wonderful panelists have already mentioned. I just want the real voices of Iranian people inside Iran to be heard. What people inside Iran, I'm not even going to talk about the diaspora, all right? We've already seen millions of people coming out on the day of action, calling for Reza Pahlavi as their transitional leader. But what people inside Iran have been calling for repeatedly is a fundamental change and the end to the Islamic regime. And many have rallied around one figure, Reza Pahlavi. It is very important that this to be recognized by the West and to be acknowledged. Also, I just need to say, I often hear another claim on the Western media, and that is there is no plan for transition. And that is simply not correct. There is a detailed roadmap proposed by Reza Pahlavi and the opposition and the team, a comprehensive plan outlining how Iran could transition to a secular democracy, rebuild its economy, and lift people out of poverty. I just hope that the West can see what true Iranians inside Iran and outside Iran want. As you said, we are peaceful people, and all we want is a free, secular, democratic Iran.
Shooka, Shayan, Ardeshir, I'm so grateful to all three of you. Merci. Hope to see you again soon. We'll have you back. Merci. Khuda Hafiz.
Merci. Merci.
Big thanks to our panel, Shayan, Ardeshir, Shooka. I appreciate you guys and navigating some interesting waters where we're in right now. For you out there listening or watching us on YouTube, by all means, give us your thoughts if you wish to. You can email us at info@roqemedia.com, info@roqemedia.com, or you can post a comment on any of our platforms, as you often do. We appreciate you. This is full time for this edition of Roqe. Thanks to the amazing core team who put this show together twice a week right now. Super Paris Sanjarani, Sabi Roham Maher, and the photo and video queen Tina Farahi. Special thanks as well to Smart Pega, Charming Kimia, Talented Anahita, Methodical Kabe, and to the Rising Keon for your help. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and sharing our content. Listen, if you haven't subscribed already on one of our platforms, please do. You can do so on any of our platforms. It's free. You can also press like on our episodes or comment as you wish. Give us a good review. We always appreciate that if you have the inclination. You can find the show on Instagram at Roqe Media. You can find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. And as ever, in the immortal words of my late uncle Behrang, make sure you listen to this part. Mizun Bashi.